Hello, everyone. This is kind of a unique thing that I'm basically trying out. So, I guess it is what it is. Don't even know if it's going to be posted. But, I guess I'm here to really just explain my experience with the operating systems and like Linux mostly. And also kind of give my opinion of different things. But I guess starting out, what I would probably do is give my basically show my current setup. So future me, go ahead and show that. Now, okay. I'm probably going to do a little bit more than just showing my setup. I'm also probably going to give like a little bit of a summary about this entire thing because I would imagine a lot of people probably find this boring and probably don't want to stare at this for nearly the entire thing. So, yeah. After the very beginning section, you can just basically listen to it like a podcast. But that aside, for my setup, just starting out, when you first boot into your system, you get a choice between Neri and Plasma. And this is the Plasma side. This right here. But I'm gonna show that later. Right now, this entire system that you see here is my Neri side. Basically, I guess to explain what Neri is, you can think of Neri as a window manager that allows you to go and have unlimited horizontal space. And for those of you who don't know what a window manager is, it's basically what allows for a user to have their like windows be set up automatically. Like, say, if you want, if you're using something like Hyperland, for example, when you start to run out of space, like, oh, like this would normally fill out. Well, this in Hyperland, you wouldn't have the going off the side of the screen. In Hyperland, it would do something like this, and it will prevent it. Also, it won't have no black space or anything. By the way, that's just me with no wallpaper. My choice. When I'm using Neri, I prefer to have nothing but black in the background. Just a my choice thing. And it is possible to have like a slideshow type background, but I don't care about that stuff for the most part. The main reason why I have it here with Plasma is because it's just extremely simple, and with Plasma, I'm going to be forced to look at it a lot. So, why not? Uh, that said, this is basically what the average window manager does. It takes your space on your screen and divides it up between many windows. And it does this according to how you have it configured inside of a configuration file. And if for whatever reason, well, I guess I'll show this. I am not doing so well. I guess I will. Well, that's not my updated. I guess I'll go for the Linux thing. Linux Control Center, and I will go for Hyper. I'll go for this first. As I was talking about for Hyperland, what this does is with Hyperland, your configuration file, which is located in the user directory, and inside the user directory is located a .config directory, and inside there you'd have Hyper, and then you have the config file. And this is what makes up how a window manager works. If you're talking about Hyperland, this is what it looks like. I don't have Hyperland in use right now. This is probably outdated. Also, and if I were to go to my Linux Control Center, my updated Neri config is right here. And for Neri, you can look at this, and I have like different ways of circumventing the limitations, and you can kind of just go through this at your own. The URL's up here. It's my GitHub. Like leafcache, capital for each beginning letter. But I also use this in more than just like this. And I have actually updated it to be better since I did the other two videos. So this is what the output is. And I'm just going to do this because to give a good idea. If you look at this, I can do like info about setup, Pacman, like updating all that stuff. But the main thing I really want to go over is the run arch config and the where is it? Set volume thing. The reason why I set volume and not any of the other stuff, which you can look at yourself if you chose, is because in set volume, if you were to go look, you notice that, yes, I know I don't need this. I basically made it like this, not because I need to, but because I want to. I could set it to where it automatically sets my volume, but in this case, what I chose to do is, this is my volume for my PC. If I were to play something, it would be dictated by the volume up here, unless I have the volume changed in the playback, which is, this is how I control my volume if I'm not using that or the keybinds to go up and down with the volume. And if I don't want to basically gamble my time, I could just do this. Press my keybind shortcut, and then it says volume make 98. Well, right now, that's just a suggestion. And if I were to press the other keybind, then it updated it. But then, if I wanted to go ahead and change it to something like, oh, that's 55. Let's do that instead. Like, those are basically suggestions until you get to what you want, and you can just apply it with the other keybind. And there's also these applications. One being kind of standing out, where these two are just applications that are basically normal. Like, one's the Bluetooth stuff, and then the other is the volume control, which is also known as like path control, if I'm not mistaken. Then this is from from this is from Plasma. Although this is from Plasma, there are some things that transfer over from Plasma to the other stuff like Neri, Hyperland. There are some things that can transfer over. Like using of this app to set up your Wi-Fi, internet. You can even do it for Bluetooth and whatnot. Your choice. It's just not everything works. Like, say if I were to change this here, it's not gonna add no animation to my system. It's just because this is not Plasma, so most of the stuff here will not work. But if I were to do it inside the Plasma, then it will work. But some of the more important stuff, like the Bluetooth, internet, makes it easier to do. You don't actually need to go through the terminal with the, I think it was IWCTL command off the top of my head to set it up. Or even have a network manager with the applet thing that allows you to have the thing up here where you right click it and you can connect to the internet that way, which I currently don't have. It's just like different things. I guess to demonstrate my current setup, what I'm gonna do, or demonstrate a little bit of what I was talking about, is I type 11 and then I type, I believe it was 50, what I was using before, and then it would change it like, okay, 15, 78, those are the volumes that it's picking, and then these are the seconds it's taking to pick it. Being like every second it picks a new one if it's not what I selected up here, which is 50. And you can see that it's changing each and every time. And since it's random, you can, it's like you may get it instantly, or you may have to wait like a second or two or a minute. Depends. Right now it's over 30 seconds. How long will it take? I don't know. This time I'm getting relatively bad RNG. But either way, I also have the keybind to directly lower it and make it higher, but I prefer not to use it, and I could just rebind it to something more convenient, but I choose not to. But as of right now, that is how it's set up. Once it gets done, it goes back to the thing you saw before, where it shows the rest of the things that did or didn't trigger, and it just completed. So there you go. And the other thing is the ArchConfig version 2. This dictates what I have installed, like say path control true, path control true to have it installed, and I install it by Pacman. Then PyInstaller true, but by Yay. And it just kind of goes through the entire theme. And if you look at how this works up here, this is basically, it's like name, install, true, false, or in some cases null, which means do nothing. Then from, which is basically Pacman or Yay. And just as a example, I have Plasma as no because right now I don't intend on doing anything to fix it because it's not a problem. It's just, since Plasma is I'm not really sure what it's called, so I'm just gonna say group package. You can't just install, uninstall Plasma regularly, or at least from my understanding. So what you have to do is, once you do sudo pacman s plasma, there's a line, but whatever. Um, you'd basically be subjected to installing everything. But if you want to uninstall it, you can't just do RNS to remove it and all the directories that are not directories, dependencies that are not used. You can't just do that. You have to, from my understanding, remove everything related to Plasma. So as of right now, probably won't change. I just keep it as null and turn it true when I want it installed and no when I don't want it to do anything. But for most cases, true means make sure it's installed. If not installed, then install it. False means if it's installed, uninstall it. And it just kind of goes throughout the entire thing. But that said, that's how it works. I also have multiple different versions, etc. And unless I'm forgetting something, I believe I've shown you practically everything of my setup. What my setup is, it's like relatively simple. It's just different keybinds to do different things. I also like doing things like, oh, wrong thing, I think. Yeah, this where it picks like a random, like, how big do you want your window? Like, but whatever. That said, I'm not really losing anything except time, but I guess to summarize this entire video before I move on to this and then go over to that is when I first started using Linux, I was basically ignorant of practically everything, and I started with Linux Mint. It was a good experience for a new user. I was in a state of mind where that was actually pretty nice to have because, well, I probably would not have continued Linux if it wasn't the way it was, because I would have thought that it was kind of bad or anything like that. But as time went on, my ignorance grew to someone who knew, and I switched from Linux Mint, although I probably shouldn't have jumped that far ahead. But I jumped from Linux Mint to Arch Linux. And if you try as a new Linux user to go from something that is really low maintenance, really low knowledge needed, and you try to go to something that requires more maintenance, requires more knowledge, well, you're probably not going to have a great time if you're new starting out. And I do not regret that, because through that time of me being ignorant of most things and having to, at times, fix many problems that I caused myself, and still occasionally do, like, cause my own problems, but I don't do it nearly as much, and I mean nearly as much, as I do in the past. Also, to clarify, now I barely have any problems at all, and when I do have a problem, it's normally, did I do something that I forget I did? because I like to tinker, mess around with my system, and because of that, sometimes I mess around with something I shouldn't mess with and forget I did that, and well, that can lead to certain things not working as intended, which is caused by me and fixed by me. That is, if I have the willingness to actually fix it. Because if it's too small of a problem, I don't mind just letting it be, because, well, I tried messing around, like, one of the problems was I tried messing around with, like, Wi-Fi and all that type of stuff, and, well, I installed and messed with, like, Network Manager, and I also had what came in by default, like, with the ISO, the way to connect to the internet, so you can install Arch Linux. And, well, I'm talking about my current state right now, but uh, I messed around with that stuff, and I have it to where I don't know exactly what I did, just me being ignorant, but I installed, messed with some things, and I see, like, it works, but then when I uninstalled it, and now I'm basically back to what I had before, when I start up my PC, it may connect to the internet, but it's very slow. So what I do is I go to the Plasma to do like a quick disconnect and reconnect to the internet, and that fixes it. Like, that fixes it. And I don't know why that is, and that's so minor that I really don't care. So it's fine to me that it's that way. So, because it's only something that happens within the first, like, I don't know, minute of my opening up my system and being like, oh, my internet's going slow. Let me fix that by disconnecting, reconnecting. So, yeah. And off the top of my head, I don't think there's really any other problems that I have. I mean, there is one which involves Call of Duty Black Ops 3, but it's weird how that's like the only game that stopped working while everything else just remained the same. But, simply put, black screen after the intro, and I don't know what I did, and I know it's a me issue because it works on other devices, but as soon as I put it onto this PC, by the way, all devices running Linux, it does not work. So I know it's something I did with my system, but I don't know what I did with my system to cause it. So take that as you will. And since I can just play it on my other system, I have no problem with just letting it be broken on this system. So it is what it is. That said, there are a few things that you can do to figure out what's wrong with it. That is, one, you can go to Proton DB, which is a website that tells you if a game works, which most of the time you don't even got to think about it. You can just install it, and the majority of the time it will work seamlessly. But for those rare cases, you just go there. If people say do this, then it's likely true. You just follow the instructions. And For the times where it doesn't work and it seems to be something that is not the problem that they're having, then it might be something that it's something that you've done or you've set up in a particular way that no one else has. And for me, it could be any one of many things. I don't know. I don't want to really go through the steps. Whatever. I'm fine. That said, continuing on, when talking about like me going to Arch Linux, over time my ignorance became, well, not just ignorance but suffering, but as my knowledge grew and I became not ignorant, my suffering lowered. And once I learned how Linux worked on a more deeper understanding, then Arch Linux started to be more like a system where, like, it feels to me like it's a stable system. Although it's rolling release, and for the majority of people who try it, it may not be stable, but then it kind of depends on how you manage Arch Linux, because if you know what you're doing, you can set yourself up to where it doesn't break often, even if it does break. And then there are the occasional times where an update inevitably breaks it because the maintainer themselves sends a broken package or a broken update, but that has not happened to me yet. Maybe that's because I don't update my system regularly. I usually wait like once a month or something like that. So, I don't know. Also, not sure if that's a good thing. That said, um, whenever I was new, went to Arch, and I actually started doing pretty well. And once I started doing pretty well, I made some decisions that, due to my ignorance, and I wouldn't have known that was a bad idea until I tried other options to have a reference point of what was bad and what was good. Because without a reference point, many things or at least I wouldn't be able to figure out what is good and what is bad. But over time, I went to Arch, I went to NixOS, then I went back to Arch. And when I went back to Arch, I learned even more, and things gotten even better for me. And then I went back to NixOS, and then back to Arch, where I am now. And to elaborate on why I go back to NixOS and back to Arch is because right now, Arch is my favorite and NixOS is my second. And when I'm talking about NixOS, NixOS is done in such a way where everything's done by the configuration file. Like, it is so convenient, so nice, you just gotta understand it, that keyword, since it does everything different than a traditional Linux distro, which some people debate that it's not a distro, but to each their own. It's like you're learning something entirely new, with a few similarities. But more differences than there are similarities. That said, NixOS is great in its own way, and I would say purely because of the options I have. No, I'll say it this way. Going to NixOS inspired me to turn my Arch Linux setup into something similar to NixOS. Hence why I have the Arch config. And the Arch config is designed in a way that I can just declare what I want installed, and it will install it for me when I run the bash script. And it will basically go through the entire steps and install everything. And uninstall what I don't want. And if I specified, set it up how I like it. Which is also, if you look at the other things like apply Neri config and whatnot inside the start bash or start script or whatever it's called. Which is why you see all the other stuff. But it's because of the ability for me to, in bash script, create my own version of how NixOS does things, but on Arch Linux. But also keep some of the features that Arch Linux has. Like, I have kind of a hybrid of both. Although it's not technically declarative, it still is resembling the declarative nature of it, where I have a config file which declares what I have installed and what I don't have installed. And I can also install things manually without adding to the config file, which means if I were to use the config file again, if I were to use the config file on like another system or I reinstalled using that config file or something, it will not include what I had installed previously, which was not added to the config file, which is good for if you want to have a stable system that is just what you want and you know that works. Not saying that NixOS is unstable. NixOS is actually one of the most stable Linux distributions there is. But I guess you can say all this comes down to my experience with Linux is the more you're ignorant, the more you're probably going to suffer. Well, suffer is not the right word because there's different varying. Because if all you're doing is gaming, then for the most part, you don't really need to know much. You can go for like CachyOS, Bazzite, or even, I don't know, one of the new user-friendly distributions like Linux Mint, or by what I heard, Zorin OS. I've heard Zorin OS is like a new user, good distribution, and Fedora is actually a good one for if you want to do like a mixture of everything. And although technically distributions do matter, but it doesn't really matter in the same sense of, hey, you must pick a good distribution. Because you can pick a Linux distribution that is not so great and then change it however you like. The main thing that really matters in a Linux distribution is how much do you want set up for you? If you want almost everything set up for you, then go to a new user-friendly system. And that means you likely have very little issues. And you won't need much knowledge on how to do things, especially if all you're doing is gaming. Like, most things work. Just exclude anti-cheat games. And, well, there are some anti-cheat games that do work, but most of them refuse to allow Linux because Anti-cheat on Linux is kind of pointless because what it does is anti-cheat, they couldn't seem, or at least they're they're not putting anti-cheat into the kernel itself, and they're not putting, well, let me rephrase. They're not putting anti-cheat into the kernel itself the same way that, or a similar way to how anti-cheat on Windows runs. Basically, it runs alongside, like, it, if they wanted to, they can control your PC using anti-cheat. That's the type of privileges that anti-cheat has. But that said, it's not like that on Linux. With Linux, they have to do it as a user, a user space, which has significantly less privileges due to how Linux tries to keep everything more safe. In unless a unless the root user or someone with the privileges runs something with absolute access to everything, the most that application can do is what you yourself can do. So anti-cheat, somewhat pointless. I would prefer, I don't care if someone steals this idea from me or if it's already out there and no one just thought about it again. I don't know. I haven't heard of it from anyone else except for one person. But it was like how they used to do it in the past, briefly. Do anti-cheat based off of how what are the chances of, like, if this action, is it even possible? If this action, what are the chances of this person getting headshots and aiming down sights before this person being like, okay, is it even possible for this person to know based on their perspective? I know that's complicated to do, but there are ways of doing it. And if it's done right, then it will be done in a way that regular people who are not cheating will have no problems. But people who are will have problems. Because their actions that the system can pick up on can pick it up. That said, I'm just going to finish up the summary because this is going to be a very long video if I don't come to an end. In short, I started with Windows for around a year. It was fine. Windows, all I knew. For someone who doesn't really know much about technology, Windows 10, it's fine. It's good. No problems. It just forces things on you to a certain extent, but it's just something you can ignore, I guess. But it is what it is, I guess. Then switching over to Linux Mint, I liked it. And development-wise, I was learning development. And the more I got into it, the more I realized that it is better to do development on Linux from my perspective than it was on Windows. Then I went to Arch Linux. Underprepared, but that's why I'm so good at avoiding issues, because I learned how to avoid issues from experience. And because of that, I have a stable working system with all the things that I want from a system. And if I really cared about fixing my issues with Call of Duty Black Ops 3, I can. I just have to put a decent amount of effort in trying to find the source calls. NixOS, very much liked it. Inspired my Arch config, which led to me having more controls over my entire system, being like turning my Arch config into a Linux control center, which can run my Arch config from inside of it, while also managing my sound and other things, which can also be managed by the window manager and can also be managed by Plasma. I'm going to go ahead and call it here, and there's the summary. It's really about experience and knowledge. Once you have the experience and knowledge, or more or less knowledge on what to do, what not to do, which you get from experience, then it really doesn't matter. I guess I'll have everything. I guess I will continue with this and there. Hello. Please ignore whatever's in the background and all that stuff. This is my Plasma side of my setup, and I guess I'm just going to show it. As to how things work is, a lot of the stuff here... Oh. Let me turn this off. I don't need to hear myself at the moment. Okay. A lot of the stuff here is, just like Windows. I don't really ever use this too often, but when I do, I I use it something like this. I open up, like, a Brave browser, watch whatever, or do whatever. Clarification. When I use it, it's normally when I want to go for some other type of vibe other than the window manager type way of doing things. Because, well, I'm the type of person who gets bored of the same thing all the time, so this switching back and forth between these two different type of things satisfy me when I occasionally get that urge of I want something new. Or Alacrity. And a lot of the time is just, how do I say this? Whenever I do actually come here, I normally do this for like a little while before I decide to go away. By go away, I mean go back to Neri. For instance, whenever I come to this setup right here, this part of my setup, Plasma, I normally come here with the mindset of I just want something different, just to chillax or something. I don't really know. Not to say I don't chillax with the other setup. It's just like I don't really know how to explain it exactly. Sorry, I'm kind of bad with my words. It's like when you get bored of the same thing and you just want something different, I just go to this setup and there it is. Something different. And the good thing about this setup is there are different, like there were, how do I say this? For whatever reason, actually I know the reason. The reason why is because when you install Plasma, you have all the base stuff that Plasma gives by default, and it sets it up all for you. And that makes it to where if you have something like Dolphin, there are some things right here that is like, I have my phone was connected, and it's because Like my phone right here, like I was how do I say this?
Very small. I put at the top.
My phone was connected, and I done it on Plasma because I did not install the necessary things to get it working with Neri and set it up in that way. I don't even know how currently. So I just switched over to Plasma to transfer my file via cord to here. I could have done it by Bluetooth if it wasn't over 4 gigabytes, because it's the video that I intend to have this. It's this right here. But for clarification, I don't know why, but on Android at least, probably the same for iPhone, but then again, I don't really know. Uh, iPhone seems to have like a lot of incompatibility with anything that is not iPhone or Apple related, but that aside, there is a limit, for 4 gigabyte limit of anything you want to send. If it surpasses that, you can't really send it, unfortunately. So that's a more clear explanation on why I use the cord, because the cord you can just plug it up if you have a good enough cord and just start using. Something to note is on Neri you have to set that up, but on Plasma, which does not transfer over to Neri, even if you have Plasma installed, uh, in Plasma you have to it just works. You just plug it in, and you can click on the thing at the bottom to connect your phone, and you can copy your files or move your files through the phone to the cord to the PC. It's just like, this is something new that I'm trying out, and if it turns out well, I might try it again. I don't know, but for now, this way of doing things is the not normal. Also recording, like OBS, and another thing is, when it comes to like how things are, I normally keep things like default, but if I decide to go with like anything different, I normally would change this to something like this. And now, say for instance, I close this out. Now all apps have this type of animation. And I can change the speed of that animation based on how much I have the slider. It's a nice thing that Plasma has, but something that only keeps me interested for a little while. Given the fact that the convenience of just being able to do it very easily does not outweigh the fact that it does kind of get annoying for you have to wait for the animation to get finished for certain actions to be done. When you like at the bottom, when you open up the thing for your applications in Plasma, if the animation is still opening or active, you can't click on anything or do anything until it's done. So if it's too slow, you can't run it. Personally, as of recently, I've been preferring instant, no animation. And then there's also until this other stuff like display, monitors, sounds, comes with Plasma. There's even where is it? There's a remote desktop. I have not used it. I'm just gonna have it in 2x speed. So I don't know if it works well or even if it works, but it looks to be here. So yeah, and it's just kind of like so many different things. I did end up setting up a keyboard shortcut. What was that? I'm looking at the wrong thing. This right here, and it starts up Alacrity and it does the start bash. So basically, if I just do this, this right here, it opens up. Oh, wonder why that is. Let me. Oh, hindsight, I did change the name from Arch Config to Linux Control Center. Oh, I'm an idiot. I know why. Because this right here. I changed it from what it was before to this. And let's change this to, instead of that, unless I'm mistaken, it should work now. I may have to press apply. Last time I did that, it took me doing this. So I guess I'm going to do this for the moment. But I'm going to do cancel. I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to do add new. Script. Paste. Dash. And do add. If it doesn't work this time, then, well, it doesn't work. Remember to apply your settings. Maybe something's changed. I don't really know. Oh, hold up. No? Just seems I'm slow. If you notice, the reason why I said, oh, hold up, is because that looks different. The command looks different from how it looks at the top, at the very end. Oh, now it works. I just had to press apply. I'm an idiot. This right here, if I were to put in something, but in this case, you can just read it, but I can press this and it tells you all the different things that I can do. And this is mostly everything special about my config. I mean, no, not my config. The config now doesn't wait for you indefinitely. I made it to where it stays for a minute and then disappears. So that even if you forgot about it, it would just go away after a while. Unless you are having something like one of those actions running and it's waiting for your input, then it won't. But it depends. Plasma setup here, so there's really not anything much more to really talk about other than maybe the wallpaper that changes and the fact that if I go down here, open, like I hover down here, it has my thing pop up. Multiple different workstations. There's like other things. There's features that you have only in Plasma because you have to set it up for Nuri or any other window manager if you're trying to do it in there. Then there's some features that if you install Plasma, it transfers over to the window manager. For example. No, the reason why I have NeoVim 1 for root is because for the not often case that I use NeoVim for like sudo NeoVim, I would like to still keep my setup. So my like how I have it configured. So that's why that's there. Because the root user, which when you use sudo, that's what you're using it as, all permissions, don't have the same configuration stuff as the regular user that you normally will be. If you were wanting an easy way to connect to Wi-Fi, install Plasma, and you go to the Wi-Fi and Internet section. Once you're connected and get it all set up here, you go over to the window manager, open up the exact same app, and voila, you can change your Wi-Fi even though you're not on Plasma. Not showing it primarily because I'm unsure of those. It says something to do with IP, so I'm not going to show it just in case because I don't want to dox myself or anything like that. The Plasma settings app. But simply put, I guess what I'm going to do is just show you one of the things. There you go. Also, if I press enter, it will make it go away, but it's just whatever. I guess this is everything for now. Little side note, I could do it here as well. It's just that's what it is. It'll wait a minute and then close, but it is what it is. I'm going to unfull screen this and start this. Okay. I'm gonna have this on 2 speed, times 2 speed, to cut down on the amount of time it takes. Sorry for those of y'all who are not used to 2 times speed, but I normally watch like videos or whatnot in 2 times speed because it takes half the time, like 50% less time to finish the video. Even if it's like, hypothetically, if it's a 10-hour video and on 2 times speed, that 10 hours will actually take 5 hours because you're getting through the video twice as fast. Because for each minute, 2 times speed cuts it in half to 30 seconds. Hour to 30 minutes. So, that's why. Okay. With that done, in the past, what I have done is when I first started was I tried Windows for the very first time somewhere around, well, daily driving, somewhere around 2020, I think. But it could have been sooner, it could have been later. I'm not entirely sure. I'm not very great with timing. But what ended up happening is I basically decided to try it out because I wanted to get a PC. I didn't know what a PC was like for the most part because the most I've ever had experience with is like school related stuff, mostly Chromebooks. So up until that point, I was pretty much technology illiterate. I believe that's the right wording. And I didn't have much experience with like laptops or nothing besides consoles because I didn't have a lot of money growing up. Now, I still don't have a lot of money, but I have more. I'm in a more fortunate situation. After some time of me messing with Windows, trying to basically just enjoy it, like have fun with it, I slowly got myself into like development. I originally was thinking game development because I just preferred game development. I just wanted to do it. And in hindsight, starting off, it probably wasn't the best choice because, well, first, without a solid plan and a reasonable set of actions, that's probably not going to work out well. Not to say it can't, because it surely can. It's just under my conditions, not so much. Not yet, at least. So I was doing stuff with Windows, and then eventually I heard about Linux. I had no idea really what it was for the most part, other than it's a operating system, more it's better for developers in general. And at that point in time, I was like, sure, I would give it a try. So I heard it and also started to realize it from experience because at the time I didn't really know the direction I should be going. So I started off with a mixture of web development and game development. I was inefficient. Me being ignorant of many things, I tried getting a USB, putting it on there, and putting it onto my system, dual booting it. And how that went was kind of not so great for the very couple of tries. I don't remember exactly what I did to mess it up, but what happened was, at the time, the first time, I installed it, but then nothing really happened, if I remember correctly. And then the second time I tried giving it a try, I did actually manage to, like, get it on there, with one caveat. For one reason or another, I didn't know why. Linux Mint is what I chose to try to do it with. It had no internet connection, and I had to use Ethernet, which not really convenient for my circumstances. So I ended up going back to Windows. I believe at the time that has something to do with both drivers and the fact that I was using a external Wi-Fi antenna. So that was the first and only PC that I recall having an external antenna for Wi-Fi. Antenna, however you say it. So take that as you will. And because that was the first and only time, I never did fully learn why that was. It was for not really sure how long. And then, whenever time has passed and I was more knowledgeable about technology genuinely, not sure if that's the right word, I decided to give it another try. And I successfully did it, internet and everything. At the time, I think I did
have another computer than before, because or PC, because originally I believe I was using a antenna that like an external antenna for the Wi-Fi, and I believe I didn't have the drivers or something installed for it. I don't really know currently because after I never really messed with any of that afterwards, so I never really.
Just a little side note, drivers for most things are installed into the kernel by default. There are certain things that you do have to install drivers for, but the majority of it, you don't gotta think about it. Uh, One of the most notable is if you're using NVIDIA, then you kind of have to think about that a little bit more. I would recommend staying away from NVIDIA, like hardware. That is if you're wanting to have a better experience, but in the same class of experience or whatnot, there are a few things that is good for Nvidia because of the fact that Nvidia, if you're a video editor type person and you're using DaVinci Resolve, yeah, you can run DaVinci Resolve on Linux on non Nvidia hardware. It's just typically you have to do a few extra steps because they're designed for Nvidia and Nvidia hardware. I don't know why that is, but that is something to keep in note. And then there's also a few minor things, like some things not being installed naturally when it comes to Nvidia. So, yes, things will work out of the box. It's just keep in mind most drivers are installed, but not all drivers are installed by default. Most of the time.
Got the chance to thoroughly learn about it. Besides the time which I basically just went back to Windows and then came back, I would say a couple months later. I'm not really sure. So my experience at that point was it was actually pretty nice. For the most part, yeah, gaming at that point in time was iffy, or for what I'm using, for what I did gaming with, it was actually good for the set of games that I did. So I didn't really need to care about that all that much.
Mostly single player games. I did get into some multiplayer games, but they were multiplayer games that me and someone else played, and fortunately, they worked well under Linux at that point of time.
But if I'm talking about like other like games that other people would normally play, or even multiplayer, at the time this was before the Steam Deck, and gaming itself was just like it's iffy whether that game would work or not. But for what I wanted it did what I wanted, so I liked it a lot. So whenever I actually started like continuing and playing with it, like
Casual gamer here.
development wise, I liked it more. Like in every aspect except gaming, I did like it more. It's just you had to know a bit more about Linux for it to really kind of.
To some extent, that still remains true to this day. Yes, most games work out of the box, no problem. Most games. But there are some games that do require either a tweak or you just can't run due to anti-cheat. But those amount of games are little compared to the majority which do work. And it's still improving and it's getting better as time goes on and the market share gets bigger. That's going to be less of an issue going on. We just need to get things up to where this community, hesitant to say because a lot of people in the quote unquote community choose to be off putting to new users. And it's because of that that many people choose to just separate themselves from Linux because they don't get the proper help that they need because people assume that their perspective is the perspective that a new user will have. But that is often not the case because the reason that I have a perspective that allows me to avoid problems and whatnot and have a really good experience and have a experience the way that I like it is because I have a mindset and I developed my I developed through experience. So take that as you will. But a lot of people I would recommend just kind of ignoring while taking what they say into consideration. But mostly just ignoring because I don't know what they get out of it other than the feeling of superiority or something like that. But whatever. It is what it is. I'm going to stop talking about that for now.
Suit you? I'm not entirely sure how to really phrase it. For me, it was like, okay, I got into like Linux Mint. Then I basically tried to use it similar to if I was on Windows, except at the time I was looking at the apps and I noticed that there was a software store. So I decided to look at that and it had basically everything that I would want. So at that point I was like, this is actually pretty good. I can use this. So I chose to like install, like, I believe I installed Steam as a Flatpak, I installed OBS, I installed, well, I'm not sure if I did OBS at that point. I'm not sure if I did OBS at that point, but I probably did. And
I most likely did. Because around that point, I was considering doing YouTube. I know I already had a YouTube channel and smaller stuff that I did for my phone, but I never really considered that much of anything. So take that as you will.
I pretty much just daily drove it. For the most part, for a simple user, it was actually really good. It's just, as I was saying, at that point in time, it was lacking in gaming, and on certain things, you did need to know about your operating system, but since Linux Mint really kind of does most of everything for you, you can be new to Linux Mint and still get like a really good experience. So then I decided to look up at like the different Linux distributions, and I decided to go with one of the hardest ones. But I believe right around the time that I started doing that is also around the time that the Steam Deck was coming out. So how do I
Do not know for sure.
say this? So what I did was I tried. Oh, there is one thing before that. I don't know if I really should say this, but before I chose to switch to Arch Linux, there was like a point where someone I knew had a PC that they weren't using or anything like that, and it was broken, or at least the operating system was broken. And they basically said, if I can fix it, I can have it. So I did just that. Well, they didn't say that, but I fixed it for them. They still didn't use the PC, and then they ended up giving it to me. So, and what I did was it was like a broken Windows install. I don't know if there was some sort of virus that was on there previously or not. I don't know. But what I do know is whenever I deleted Windows on there and I put Linux Mint on there at the time, it worked just fine. No problems. I didn't even have no issues with the internet. It just worked. Fast forward some time, that PC was actually mine because I decided to give it to me since I didn't use it that much anyways. Fast forward some more time, and I decided to go for Arch Linux that I was not really ready for. But hey, if you're wanting to learn, then sometimes the best way to learn is to put yourself under a high pressure situation, I guess.
Sometimes if you're wanting to learn, if you put yourself in a environment you it is that you can handle, but you're like right at your limit, that can be very helpful for you long term because that will allow for you to improve yourself at a better rate than if you were to take things in smaller steps. And but that also depends on the type of person you are because some people under high pressure situations they don't do as well.
Well, that also kind of depends on how you see it because, well,
Not to saying that that's really a high pressure situation. It's just saying Arch Linux requires more work from the user.
at the time I just kept on making mistake after mistake because, well, at the time I was like, I was still not 100% knowing everything that I needed to know because when you're looking at Linux Mint kind of does most of the things for you. Nowadays, Linux Mint and Zorin OS is like the two best picks in my opinion, based on what I've heard about Zorin OS as well. Ubuntu, not as much as they used to. I
For new
kind of hesitant
users.
to recommend that, but I guess now how things are, or should I say, I guess now in hindsight, it's obvious what I did wrong and overall. But from that time, Since I was ignorant, I just didn't know. So whenever I use the Arch install script to install Arch, and yeah, that works, and yeah, that makes it easier than doing everything manually. But, and I say but, I chose the Cinnamon desktop experience, which, from my understanding now, back then, it was not like Linux Mint. Like, it looked like it, but it lacked so much functionality-wise, and it caused some problems for me. And since I was ignorant, I didn't know. I just kind of thought that it's just mostly how the thing looked, for the most part. Not
When you have nothing to compare it to, then you would start to think that what you have is normal. And if that is the case, or normal for, like, say, out of the options you would have. And that was my problem. Since I had no reference, I didn't know that the option I picked, which was Cinnamon GUI, wasn't a good option. Or it's more of, at best, an okay option.
what is installed for most of the functionality of your PC. To give more information about that, you have different options. You can go for like Plasma, you can go for GNOME. There was Cinnamon as well, and I don't remember the others. There's also window managers, but at the time I didn't know about window managers and I didn't have enough knowledge to really do it. So yeah, that's just me. But I went with possibly the worst option, Cinnamon, and it was an okay experience. I had issues due to my ignorance, like whenever I were to try to fix something, sometimes I would make it worse, and sometimes I would actually fix it. And with each failure, I learned something new, or most of the time. And eventually, I got so used to it that everything started becoming really easy for me to not have problems. I mean, still, there was a few things I still didn't know how to fix, like, for some reason, there was, trying to think, what was it specifically? I think it was my Wi-Fi. There was a few things that whenever I started booting into
Point is, something when starting out had problems like auto starting when I boot into the system. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Arch Linux, it wasn't automatically starting. I think one of them might have been my Wi-Fi. And to fix it, what I did was I just created a bash script and just did like sudo systemctl or whatever it's called, I forgot off the top of my head, and then enabled the not enabled, started the the service, and it auto connected and it worked. And auto connected because I had it connected to the internet previously, so it knew what to connect to, so I didn't have to think about that. And there's like
If it's a thing from systemd in particular, and you do sudo systemctl, you could do enable instead of start to make it to where it starts it on boot. But those are if you want to have that's if you want to have a service start when you boot. But that's if it's a service. Applications are a different story. You do that a different way.
there's like a few other things that right now I don't remember honestly, but as time went on, I decided to try out window managers, or I don't remember the exact order. I might have tried uh, a different GUI first.
Just to bring attention to one thing. If I were to go to my Neri config, you will notice that, or you can notice that these are some things here. This is what I have this here. I never did remove it because it doesn't do anything if I have it there or not. If I don't have a image where it's located, so it's fine. But that said, this is like if I want things to start on its own. If you're using Window Manager, if you're using a GUI, which is like Plasma or GNOME, you have that in the settings somewhere. There's different methods as well, but that's common.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. Going back to me explaining the like KDE Plasma, GNOME, Cinnamon, the reason why all those things were like that like all those things are different is because it's the way I explain it is like it's like a pre-set up desktop. You pick one of them and it installs, or it's like a for Plasma. It installs all the necessary stuff for internet, Bluetooth, like the settings and all the settings that it changes, there's animation.
When you install Plasma, you're installing a whole bunch of applications, and then you're installing those applications that work together in a particular way that is like a pre-setup setup. And if you're and picking your distribution is a similar thing as well, because you pick the distribution, you put it on a USB drive, you install it to your system, and it's kind of like that, but a bit different.
There's like the actual Windows look to it where you can actually move startup, desktop apps, and all that stuff. And yeah, Cinnamon did have a lot of that stuff, but at the same time, it was lacking, I would say, almost half of it. So yeah, but it's not like I couldn't add those features in. I just didn't know how at those time. And
With Linux and enough know-how, you can add pretty much anything.
I was ignorant of even what I was missing out of as well, because I didn't even know. I was like, I had a better experience at that time on Linux Mint. So after time, going back to what I was talking about before I went back to this, at the time I decided to, I believe, try out a few of the other GUIs. I believe I tried Plasma. I don't remember much of what I did. And then that didn't really last too long because I started to try out Hyperland. And I got like a playlist of some kind, which which kind of goes over the config file for Hyperland and all the stuff that I would need to know. And put it simply, in Hyperland, it's a window manager, which in the home directory you have the .config, and then inside there you have Hyperland, and then the config inside there. And inside that config you have your entire window manager setup like completely like defined. Like say if you want spaces in between your windows. Actually, to be more specific, what Window Manager does, to be more specific, is it organizes your windows for you. Instead of it just popping up floating somewhere on your screen, it puts it on your screen, dividing the space you have on your screen with the apps you already do have open. If you have one app, then it'll take 100% of your screen. If you have two apps, then it'll take 50% of your screen. You can change that, but by default, that is how it acts.
Configuration file dictates how that works. Could be different.
And then if you have three, then you can have it to where it takes, I believe, I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was like maybe a quarter, and a half. But then again, I'm not entirely sure because I don't really remember. Because I remember, I think, it taking half the screen, and then two windows, and then two windows, but they're on the like right above and right underneath, which equal up to another half the screen. I'm probably thinking about this wrong because it's been like a long time, and I didn't stay too long with Hyperland because, or should I say, I'm also very forgetful. But I liked Hyperland a lot, and I liked it more than the GUI stuff. But around that same time, I decided to look into other things. I learned more about Arch Linux in general, and I started to actually go on a more upward trajectory on user experience. And now, or at that point, I would say my comfortableness was, I would say, if not right where I was with Linux Mint, it was probably a tad better, but probably right up at it because it was like a new.
What I mean by this is it took me some time to get to the same point of comfortableness, or should I say, where I was satisfied with my system and knew how to do things. It took me a little while to get to that point because I didn't know a lot of the things that Arch kind of forces you to know. You could just deal with a broken system if you really chose to, but I didn't want to deal with a broken system. And also with a uh, regular distribution like Linux Mint, you have like an actual working full-fledged like system. So it took me a while to understand how all that works and how to get what I want out of it, how to get the features and whatnot.
Experience because I never used window managers and stuff before this point, so there was a lot of things that kind of. But at that point, disregarding the window manager newness to me, I would say I was actually a bit more comfortable with Arch Linux than Linux Mint because I've gotten so used to what to avoid, what goes with what, and what doesn't go with what, and how to fix things if something does go wrong.
Over time, I did get better and I did surpass and like Arch Linux more. right now, Arch Linux is my favorite, followed by NixOS. And if I'm going only by what I have experienced and not secondhand knowledge, then Linux Mint. But there's also other distributions like Fedora, which is good for if you're wanting to do a little bit of everything, which, knowing myself, that actually would be a pretty good pick probably, because I'm developer. I'm like a developer, like different types I use, like whatever's on my resume, like Java, like JavaScript, React, Python. I'm kind of all over the place. Jack of all trades, master of none type of thing. So, yeah.
How to avoid breaking something. And it actually, with Arch Linux, it's more like if something breaks, it's more of a skill issue. Well, I don't mean it in any rude way, but it's like if something breaks, unless it's because of an update, a lot of the times it's user made. Like you're trying to fix one thing or you're trying to update something in your system. By update, I mean, like, say, change something. Like, say, for instance, you're trying to change the theme of your entire system to something that is not exactly a part of, like, Plasma or something. Like, you can pretty much customize whatever you want. It's just if you're not going with what is by default there, then it's going to be harder for you to do it. But I wasn't really that type of person, really. I'm kind of a simple person. In Plasma, Cinnamon, actually, even Cinnamon, I didn't even have a wallpaper for the most part, because I chose not to. At some point, I did decide to put up a Tokyo Gold wallpaper, but I really didn't care enough to really change it after that. And then, whenever I was on Plasma,
The experience of Cinnamon, the GUI from Arch, is not to be desired. And I really took me a while to really get to a point where, well, once I actually got a taste of a different experience, I believe it was after NixOS. Could be wrong. Could be a little bit before. I did try out a different GUI, and because of me trying out a different GUI, I got like a taste of what is better and what is worse, and etc. I got like a new reference. Because of that, I realized the trajectory that I should have gone. Trajectory meaning what I should have figured out, what I should have learned, why I was more stagnant in certain areas. Because I didn't have no reference and didn't know different things.
I did decide to have a.
Or you can also check it down to I'm not the type of person who really cares about innovation to a certain extent. So I'm not the type of person to really just be like, just because I can, I will. If it's something, it would likely be just because I want to. And I can. Which is why I use a window manager and I have a tad bit of randomness to my window manager, because I like the concept of random. I don't know why. I just do.
Slideshow of wallpaper for the background, but once I got it set up, I never really changed anything at all. So, for me, I'm kind of like, once I have something set up and I like it, I don't normally really change it for the most part, which is probably why half the time I don't even run across bugs. But whenever I do change something, I don't actually have problems for the most part, because I've learned what not to do and what to do. There are some exceptions, like if I'm doing something that is new to me, but that's normally not the case. After time with Hyperland, configuring it, I decided, I've been hearing about this distribution, which some people say it's not a distribution, but then other people argue that it is a distribution, a Linux distribution, which is, well, by this point, Steam Deck's already out, and
Just to explain, the difference between declarative and imperative is, with declarative, you're saying what you want your system to be like, you're saying what you want, and the system figures out the rest to get the result you're wanting. While the imperative is, you're telling the steps to get to the result you're wanting to the system, and the system does that. similar to how when you're coding, if you're coding, uh, the script goes normally from top to bottom, and you tell it to do, I don't know, in just like a basic thing, I guess, would be to log something to the console. You can, like, say if you have like a three things, like say, hello, this is test and this is test 2. Well, if you have 3 different lines, it would do it in the order of which you put it from top to bottom. But it also depends on the language you're using, because some languages do it more complicated, other languages not so much. But typically, you'd normally have it one line, very short, not much to it. That said, imperative is kind of like that. While declarative is, say, if you had a function. A function is, say, I'm talking to people who are really more experienced with coding for the moment. I can loop back around. A function is basically a set of code that will run when you say it to run. And it would do different things based on the input that you give it. So, in short, you can kind of think of it like what I did right here with my Arch config. Wrong thing, me. Why did I do that? It's this. This is basically a function where this is the code, and in this code it takes the parameters that you give it, and depending on the result of the parameters, like whether the second parameter is true or false or no, or whether the first one is a name or not, and the third one, which is where you want it. And it would just, boom. It's like in the first if, installed true, okay, from, okay, Pac-Man, and, well, if it's not installed, then go ahead and install it. Give you some time to cancel if you need to cancel it, Control plus C. That said, because of the inputs, which is these 3 things, and this being the function, it does different things. And that's essentially what declarative is. You're basically saying, hey, I want this to be installed. And you declare it by having manage install OBS true Pac-Man. That's the coding way of explaining it, I guess. The non-coding way of explaining it is when you go to a restaurant. Most people would say what food they want, and then they would give it to you. You don't think about the process. The chefs think about the process of how to make the food and all that stuff. Unless you're the type of person who don't want a specific thing, but then you're not really thinking about the process, you're really just thinking about what you don't want. So, but for simplicity reasons, if you go to a restaurant and you say, I want a burger, they'll give you a burger. You were like you're declaring what you want, which would be the declarative nature, while the imperative nature would be the chefs being like, okay, to make a burger, I need to get the patties ready. I need to also get the meat molded and all that stuff. And all the steps in order, and then just give it out to you. That's an example of both declarative and imperative, which I don't think I've ever heard anyone explain in that way, but I've heard something similar, so not taking credit. I don't mean to go on tangents. Just saying.
Has been rapidly picking up and getting better for Linux. Just saying. And basically, I decided to give NixOS a try. And the reason why people say NixOS is, some people say it, some people don't. NixOS is, and also some people say isn't, a Linux distribution is because it does so many things that a regular Linux distribution would do differently. So, yeah. So imagine, I guess to really explain it, imagine like a regular system where you install things when you want it, when you need it, etc. Like say, okay, I want OBS. Okay, I can either go to the FlatHub store or software downloader, whatever you want to call it. I don't know its specifically name, like software store, I guess. Get it there, or you can go to your package manager, which is for a lot of situations that might be better, but then might not be. Kind of depends, because if you're wanting a more better, if you're wanting your applications to be isolated from your system, although technically it's not completely isolated, then you're better off going for like the FlatHub. And but if you're using something like Steam and you're using the FlatHub, it does make things a little bit more complicated if you're using external stuff, because you kind of have to give it permission to go outside the sandbox to access certain things. But besides that, it's mostly the same. But that said, for a good long while, I was just using Pacman, and I was somewhat, using the AUR and Arch User Repository, by the way, and it was like hit or miss. Like sometimes, due to my own ignorance, I would try to install something and then I would just mess it up to where it's like it was broken or something. I don't know, or at least I'm pretty sure it's due to my own ignorance. Like I would answer the questions wrong or whatnot, because once I actually put in what I want installed, like Brave or whatnot, it would ask some questions like things like clean build, and it would say like all or other things. There's also like diffs to show, and there's a third one I think, but I don't remember. But simply put, I guess, I didn't know what to really answer those questions with, so I mostly just went with random, and random got me with not so good situations on downloading. So an inconsistent install of, sometimes I would install the same thing and it'd be bad, and other times it'd be good. At the time, I didn't know. Right now, hindsight, it's purely because I didn't answer those questions correctly, and I'm like 99% sure that's the reason why. And then there's also, whenever I moving over to NixOS, I'm moving away from Arch Linux and all that stuff, and why it's so different is because the fact that everything about NixOS, the file structure, how you install things, it all really mostly comes down to, you have a config file. Well, technically 2 or more, depending on your setup. But by default, you have the hardware configuration file, and you have the regular configuration file, which is literally just configuration or something like that. And the other one's just like hardware config or something. And those are the 2 things you have by default. If you know more about NixOS, you can add more and modularize your system. But starting out, I didn't really know anything for the most part, and I was confused. In a similar way to how I was with Arch Linux. With Arch Linux, whenever I first...
In the configuration, there are different spots for different things, and if you want an application installed, you just put the name of the application inside the environment PKG area. I don't remember the specific wording. If you want things like firewall, outside of that, like inside the brackets, the main brackets, but outside of basically everything except for the main brackets, you put like the firewall settings, config stuff there, or anything else that you may want. There is a few exceptions for special apps if you want to, like Steam. By default, it's a special app because there's more to it than just install and mess with. Because if you install it, you would have like just the basic stuff, but you won't have like remote play. You won't have a decent amount of the features like dedicated servers and whatnot. And that's why you need like, I think it's like 4 lines total to add all that extra stuff, purely because Steam is a bit different than the usual app. But for the most part, you can get practically everything you would ever want, with few exceptions, from inside the Nix repositories. Also, Nix and NixOS, they're two different things. One's the package manager, and the other's the operating system.
Came to it, I was doing things, messing it up, and then I trying to figure out a way to fix it. I eventually do, etc. And then over time, I learned what not to do and what to do, and I presume that's why overall, whenever I look at people on the internet and whatnot, and they seem to not have issues. I mean, the opposite. They seem to have issues with Linux, and I'm like, that's simple, or at least to me it's simple, because I have the knowledge, the know-how, the experience, the XP. Jokingly saying that because like gaming, like say, I got so much XP, I leveled up, and now I'm at a higher level, and because of that, the way I see Linux is it's more of a, as an analogy, it's more of a level issue. When you're first starting out, you don't have the XP necessary to level up, which what that means in general terms is when you're first starting out, you don't know what to do and what not to do. And once you actually start doing it, you start to realize what are the ins and outs of why and how everything works. And eventually you get to the point where it's mostly just stable. Assuming you're more like me, where, because I don't know if other ways of using Linux, because with me, a lot of the time, I develop like different things. Like originally I was doing web development. I still do, but not as much. And I kind of like did like different stuff. Like, well, if you really want to know what I really did, you can go to my GitHub, future me. You can show that, or you can just go look for yourself, viewer. So yeah, I guess. Lee F cache, capital L for Lee, and capital F right before cache, and capital C for cache. Also,
I've already shown it. It is the GitHub account that I'm showing my code from instead of showing it directly from my computer. My computer has a more updated version, which may just be me fiddling around with my system. So some things on my computer itself may be changed because I'm like, should I have it this way or that way? So I decided to do it from the GitHub.
just to make sure that no one gets the wrong idea, F is just referring to my middle name. But that said, me heading over to NixOS, it's like I liked it a lot, but at the same time, it was not overwhelming per se. I guess it's just my mindset. It was more like I can't seem to find the documentation so I can learn off of, and then sometimes
The documentation is very fragmented. Like, there are two wikis. There's the actual official website, and then there's like these many smaller websites which you can get information from. But the main three things is the main website and the two wikis, one official, one unofficial. And for someone who's just coming in, it can be confusing because why is everything so fragmented when it doesn't need to be? Like, what's the reasoning for that? I still don't know, but it is what it is, I guess.
I would have to go find some random person's config and go based off that. But then I would realize this config is not the same as my config, and they have things like very much different. What is this?
There are different setups. Some using not window managers. Why am I saying window managers? Some using home managers and others using flakes. Basically, simply put, flakes is a way to get different versions and multiple different versions of the same app on your system, and even multiple the exact same. Or you can get something that is not on the Arch repository and just somewhere on GitHub or some other website and put it onto your system using flakes. Then there's the home manager, which is a way for your system to automatically set up your dot files, which is basically where you have all your configuration files and whatnot. So take that as you will, I guess.
Learning that there's this thing called a home manager, then there's also this thing called a flake, which sometimes at that time I was getting it confused with each other and I didn't know. Now, for a brief explanation of what it is you have the regular config, which is basically your entire system. Then you have a home manager, which well, by default, if you have your regular config, which manages your entire system, like what everyone has installed, what your entire system is like and everything, then you have the home manager, which manages what all a single user has. Like say, if you want the single user, by the way, this is not mandatory, the home manager, not mandatory, but good to use if you really want a better experience. I never did get into it. I really didn't see it as necessary for my setup because
A more easier to understand way of saying what he's about to say is the features that they supplied via home managers and flakes. I really didn't need that because I was satisfied with my current setup and I didn't really want to go out of my way. There was one instance where I did kind of want to do it, but I ultimately didn't and found a different way to do it, which was getting Neri installed. Because there's the recommended way with having Neri and the Neri shell, or whatever it's called, I don't know specifically. I have not tried it, honestly. What I've seen secondhand is it's amazing, but I haven't tried it. I might try it at some point. I just haven't got myself to actually do it. But simply put, I intend to I might try it out, but then again, I'm not sure exactly how that would go. Cuz I am satisfied and I do go back and forth with other things that so I don't know how much time I'm willing to really put out to do it if something goes wrong. I believe I won't have too much of a problem, if any, but it's just something since I've never really messed with a shell before, excluding NixOS stuff because they have Nix shells. And obviously Bash shell scripting because that's what you kind of have by default when you're using Linux, but whatever. I'll just whatever. I will continue. Simple explanation. Features, I do not need them.
since I only had one person on my system, and that was me, myself, and I never really saw no use. I mean, it could just be me misunderstanding something, but I never really saw no use in using a window manager to set up a system where, I mean, I guess the one upside would be with a system.
I didn't see no use because the way I was doing it was just fine with me. Because I set everything under my GitHub and then I can have it go back and forth between all my devices regardless of if it was NixOS or not. It's just more inconvenient to set up for setups that are NixOS purely. Because NixOS, if you want a more convenient home manager, but since I also did non-NixOS, I was fine with doing it more manually with GitHub.
With a window manager, all your .files, which is where everything is inside your .config, is all those files. I'm probably misunderstanding something. All those files are like can be preset up for you. But then for me in particular, I had all my stuff on GitHub. So did I really need to switch? Like say for Hyperland, I could have just as easily decided to go for like other things. I mean, let me rephrase. I'm getting sidetracked in my head. I could have easily just put my config on GitHub and then just put it into my system whenever I want. Just like remove the config and then clone the config from my GitHub to what I currently have. So yeah, that's really simple. And yeah, I would have to do it per thing, but I normally don't have that much stuff anyway. So yeah. As for like other things, I really did just like have. Okay. Sorry for the I'm not sure what's happening for the moment. Hopefully nothing to disturb me, but whatever. Okay. Simply put, I really didn't need a home manager. I really had all the stuff, and I really didn't have too much stuff where it's really all that much effort to fix my own system with the config files. So, yeah, I really didn't need to care. So, Nah, I chose not to. Then there was also the Flakes, which Flakes is basically a method for someone on NixOS to have, like, say, if there's something on GitHub that's not in the repository, you can use a flake to get that on NixOS. Also, you can use flakes for basically anything, even for the NixOS repository. You can just have like an older version of the same application installed using a flake, just as a newer version, like multiple of the same applications. And the good thing is they're all isolated. Like they don't mess with the system in any way unless you specify for them to mess with your system.
Everything in NixOS that you install is isolated. I guess there might be an exception if you try to make one, but for the most part, that's just how NixOS is. Which is also mostly why NixOS snapshots, where you can back up your system and whatnot, are so well done and so easily. And what I'm not sure how to really say what I'm thinking. I'll just let past me continue.
Which in certain ways it's actually very convenient, but in other ways that can cause some problems. Some things that I've noticed is if you're using KDE Plasma, GUI, whatever, the software store that they have there, the Flatpak store, whatever you call it, that only works. Unlike Arch, but on NixOS, that only works if you're using KDE Plasma. If you switch over to something like a window manager, but you still have that installed in the background, then it acts as if you have no repository set for it, which is interesting because it isolates it to where it's like it isolates it to where it goes with just Plasma stuff. But
It's as if it doesn't have a repository connected when you're switched over to a different something other than the Plasma window manager, which I believe you can fix that, but I never did because I never really used it often or whatever. I believe I might have never used it except for whenever I did mess with Plasma, which was not often.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. But then at the same time, there's other things which is actually very nice about it. But whatever. That's just like one of the things that I've noticed. I didn't really care too much because if I did install something from the Flatpak store, switch over to the other side, I can still use the application that I installed. I just need to switch back if I'm using the software store. But I really had no incentive to use it, so I never really did use it for the most part. Because with the NixOS config, like you just know the name of once you have the name of what you want installed, you just put it inside a spot inside the configuration file, and you just do the command sudo nixos rebuild switch, and it fixes it for you. Like by fixes it, I mean it installs, applies the configuration file. Like say if you put like 15 different apps inside that configuration file, it will install those apps. It will create a backup, which is actually very good. And you can go back to those backups when you reboot your system. Because when you reboot your system, there's a list of different snapshots of your system for each time you do NixOS rebuild switch, sudo NixOS rebuild switch. And basically, over time, that could actually fill up and take up like a huge portion of your storage. If you put, I forgot exactly what the stuff you put in there, but it's like garbage collector and a thing to not necessarily remove duplicated stuff, but to optimize the duplicated stuff to where it gets rid of duplicated stuff but reuses what it has already. Like say, for example, if you have a app in all versions, so just use that all snapshots of your PC. It would just use all that same thing for each one of the things. And only if you make it different, then it would make like a new version of it. That's my understanding. I'm not entirely sure if I understand it correctly, but yeah. And I really like NixOS. You can like in the config file, you set up how you want your system. You set up like any drivers, and whatnot, and excluding drivers.
If it wasn't for my Arch config and whatnot that I have set up, I'll probably be using NixOS because I legitimately like it more than Arch if I don't have my current setup with the Linux Control Center. If that wasn't a thing, I legitimately would just want to go back to NixOS.
To my knowledge, you can have the exact.
I still have the urge from time to time to go back, but until I actually have a good reason to, I probably won't do it.
Exact same reproducible setup across multiple PCs or laptops, whatever, anything that runs NixOS, and it works really fine. After maybe, I don't know, 5 months, 6 months, I'm not entirely sure, I decided to switch back to Arch Linux. I believe, if I remember correctly, that was due to me being not really understanding NixOS good enough. So I decided to just switch back to Arch Linux and use that. And it's like I was like somewhere in the middle because I like the configuration file type stuff, but at the same time, there are advantages to both how Arch Linux and also NixOS does it. There's advantages to both, and they're both good in their own unique way. Well, technically, Arch Linux is not unique because there's different distributions of the same thing, and then there's also different Linux distributions that do a lot of what Arch does. But what Arch does specifically is you manage everything and you have the most control, rather than like some other thing, rather than the system managing it all for you. But that said, I remained with Arch. I got better with Arch. I got better with window managers. Also, I decided to switch back after some time to NixOS, and then I actually enjoyed it so much that it became my favorite distribution for a while. Right now, it's currently my second, and I can say why, but give a minute. I liked it so much. I used it so much. I learned a lot of it, and I still didn't use a home manager because I didn't see no need for it in my situation. Flakes, yeah, I could have used it, but ultimately, the regular config file gave me pretty much everything that I wanted / needed, so I was fine with that. That alone. So yeah, but after some time, I was in a position to where I was helping other people with I was in a position where I would help other people and with Linux and all that stuff. And the longer I remained with NixOS, the more my knowledge and skills with
That is something to think about, because I could just use a virtual machine or something to kind of fix that, to have certain parts of my system be in a virtual machine, just so I can keep up with things, but I'm not sure if I wanted to do that. That's another reason, kind of forgot about it, but yeah.
regular Linux, with how regular Linux does things, start to dwindle and slow down. Well, not slow down, start to fade away, because when you don't use a skill for so long, you start to lose that skill. There are some things that remain with you for much, much longer, but eventually things will fade away, eventually. Whether it takes years or just a matter of months or days, that varies depending on what it is and your experience. But, for me, I came up with an idea. Right now it's called Linux Control Center, but what it was originally called was Arch Config. What it was I switched back to Arch Linux, and then I created a bash script that acted similar to NixOS. And this bash script would basically allow for me to, in lack of a better way of saying it, recreate a similar experience that I had with NixOS, but inside of Arch, while keeping a decent amount of the advantages that Arch has, while also losing a decent amount of the advantages that NixOS has.
I said that poorly. What I mean is, although there are some things that I really miss from NixOS, the main things that I wanted from NixOS, I managed to find not a complete copy, but a method of getting it on Arch Linux, but it's not an exact replica of it, of the main stuff that I wanted. Would have been nice if I had more of it, but whatever.
And although I really like NixOS and I may end up switching back to it in the future, right now I just intend on staying with Arch Linux using a archconfig.sh, which is basically a bash script file, which originally I had it on version 1. I had it where I had a whole bunch of variables and then a function. I don't know if it's actually called a function. I just know that if I'm working with Java, the exact same thing, which it seems to look similar to, is called a function. So I'm just going to call it a function, although it's bash script, so keep that in mind, I guess. I created a function that you give it a name, you give it the true or false variable that you were like. If it's true, then it installs it. If it's false, then it makes sure that it's uninstalled. And if it's not uninstalled, it will uninstall it. And to verify that it's installed or not, I have a separate function that I call within the if statements of the function of the inside the if statement of the function. The main function for both. There's one for Pacman and then there's one for Yay. In my most recent update to it, which is version 2, basically a re-overhaul of the entire thing, I got rid of the variables except for update. If that's true, then it will make sure all my applications are up to date whenever I apply my config file by running the bash script. And it will go one by one with looking at all the applications that I've specified in my config to be installed, uninstalled, or do no action, or, yeah, do no actions. True, false, or null. But how this works is a bit different.
In version 1, it was messy, and I wanted something better, so I remade it and made it better.
I simplified it to where I have two functions. The first function remains the same, verifying whether something is installed or not, and then the second function basically merges the two other functions from the first version of the config, basically having the Pacman and Yay of both of them come together. into one function to where if in argument 1, I state the name of the application I want to install. In argument 2, I state a true or false or no of what I want installed, uninstalled, or do nothing. And then in argument 3, where is it installing it from? Is it pacman? Is it yay? If it's pacman, then it would just do sudo pacman, that small line s. If it's yay, then it would first install yay if not installed, and then use yay to install it. It would ask you a few questions because, well, those questions are essential to actually installing it. And yeah, that's basically how it is for the most part. Once you answer the questions, it's installed, and it does that for each of the things. But, and I say but, how do I say this? It's basically just a install script, which dictates what you have installed, what you don't have installed, and if it's not specified, then it does nothing to it. And if you have something in there as null, then it does nothing to it, but it acts as a reminder for me in particular to be like, this is something that I want to do something with, or I just want to keep in my mind for some reason. For example, Plasma. Whenever I do like pacman, sudo pacman, the line s, install Plasma, well, not install Plasma, just Plasma, what it would do is it installs like a whole bunch of packages that is not under the name of Plasma. And because of that, whenever I tried using the thing to dictate whether Plasma is installed or not, it would be like, Plasma is always not installed, so it's going to install it. Or it would try to install it and then say, hey, this is already installed. Do you want to reinstall it?
For better clarification, on the first iteration of installing it, it'll work as you would think. And then once it gets to the second iteration, if you run the script again, it will be like, yeah, we can reinstall Plasma and all the stuff that is for it, but do you want to do that? Because it doesn't recognize that Plasma is already installed. And it's because of that I have it as a null. So it's there, so I know about it, I think about it, or I can think about it. And it acts as a somewhat reminder to me. But that's just it.
Because that's how pacman command works. Because, well, when you run the command for pacman, it always says, do you want this installed? But in that situation, since it always comes up as hey, this is not installed, and I'm currently not sure how to fix that, except make it to where if pacman, it would check for one or more of the things that are installed, and if true, then it would assume that pacman is installed. But as of right now, I'm just going to leave it as is, which is it's a null, where if I want it installed, I turn it to true, and then after it's installed, I just turn it back to null. If I want it uninstalled, then I may have to uninstall everything individually. I never actually uninstalled Plasma, so I don't really know, and I don't really care, because with Plasma, it's actually kind of convenient to have, but at the same time, I don't really ever use most of the stuff there. I just really remain with Neri, which kind of gets me to the point of where I am now. After using Hyperland on NixOS for so long, I started hearing about a window manager that has infinite horizontal scrolling space, and I tried it out. At first on NixOS, it was...
At first, whenever I did try it out, I did manage to get it installed, and it had some problems. Like, generally it did work, but there were some applications that it just wouldn't open, or applications that open other applications, those secondary applications, it won't open. Later on, I did manage to fix it, but it took me a while to understand why. And if you want the config to it, you can look into my modular NixOS GitHub repository.
I just kept on having bugs with that. And there was barely any documentation on how getting it working. And when I finally found out the proper config for Neri, it's already been like a whole while of time. So it's like, yay, I finally figured it out. But at the same time, I've been mostly just switching back and forth between Hyperland and Neri, because at that point, I mean, it could just be a NixOS thing, because of how NixOS does things. And with the config file, if you don't set everything up the way that you want inside the config file, then, well, might as well just have like some sort of issues or whatnot. Because how I did it was I had like Neri enabled, and I had like certain things required like variables, like environment variables set up. Other things required certain things to be installed, etc. So eventually, over time, I basically just chose to mostly use Hyperland until I get that fixed. And at some point, over persistence of me being like, I want to try this out, yet for some reason it's not working. I finally figured out the proper config file to get it working with, like, no problems. It's still in my GitHub, by the way. Really good. I like it. Even after switching back to Arch Linux, I'm still using Neri, almost exclusively, for the most part. There are a very few times where I use Plasma, but that's just because, well, I want to change of something. Like, say, if it's like, well, two things, actually, but say you use something for so long, you kind of get bored of it, so you switch to something else. Well, sometimes I do that for Plasma, and then think, I really like Neri more, so I switch back to Neri, and it just kind of goes back and forth sometimes, but the majority of my time is just with Neri. And, yeah, that said, I believe this is basically everything. My overall experience currently right now, I have no real problems. I have a config file that is, I have a config file and like an entire Linux control center for whatever I may want. Like, say, with the Linux control center, I can set up my config files, I can set up my NeoVim, my Hyperland. Well, I don't have Hyperland with that yet because I haven't used Hyperland who knows how long, but I have done it with Neri. So that's what I have been doing, and that seems like everything, so yeah. So as things are right now, should be fine. What I mean by that is everything has been just going smoothly. Really not much of any problems. If not, most of my issues, if any, are mostly just towards gaming related because I'm a tinkerer and I mess with my system a lot, and sometimes that kind of messes with what I have set up for my gaming. And just recently, just Black Ops 3 on my main PC, just after the intro, it just goes to black screen. And I know it's just my PC and how I have it set up because on the Steam Deck, which is also Linux, it works, no problems. So yeah, and weirdly enough, that's the only game that has problems. Everything else after Linux have gotten very, very good with gaming. Like nowadays, it's just like you don't, for the most part, you don't gotta think about it. You just install and play. There are very few titles where you do gotta tinker just a little bit just to get it working. Black Ops 3, normally the case would be you just install and play. But if you're anywhere like if you're like me and you mess with your system, you may have an issue like a black screen. I don't know why, and I don't intend on fixing it because I can play it on my Steam Deck, no problems. So yeah, I'm fine with that. As things stand, I used to have my operating system directly on an external SSD, and I just plugged it into whatever I want to use it on. But I have now since had it put into a internal SSD inside my PC. So that is how I'm currently doing it, and probably will remain that way. It's a lot more simpler anyway. Even if you're installing whatever, it's a lot more simpler. It does complicate a few things if you're doing it on an SSD, depending on what you're doing. But for NixOS in particular, yeah, there was a few things you had to have set up, and then for Arch Linux, I don't remember how much was different, but I think there might have been something that was different. So yeah, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here. It's currently for this part of the video, or this video inside the video that I intend on doing, 1 hour and 6 minutes and 42 seconds and going up. So yeah, hopefully everything's good for everyone. And I guess from my experience, just final words. Linux is like a game in a certain way. Once you gain enough experience and level up, eventually you get to the point where you really don't get much of any problems at all, for the most part. I mean, there are some things that are like better on Windows, but the majority of the things is Linux is better. The majority of the things. Also, user friendliness is something that Linux does not have, except for those Linux distributions that is all about user friendliness. But then even with them, sometimes there may be some unclearness and unuser, just because of how Linux in general is just made. Because most of the time, Linux developers and all that stuff develop things for themselves, and they don't mind tinkering and all that stuff, or at least from my understanding. So unless there's some sort of like change in the mindset of developers making it more accessible to the average person, Linux may still grow very fast, or just faster, or may just grow, but it may not grow as fast as it could because of that. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Have a good day, night, whatever time it is for you.
Well, I guess I really have nothing to say, so I guess I will end it. Please give me input on the way this is made, whoever that watches this, because I'm curious to know if this is even a way of doing things that people like. Also, I'm not used to doing it this way, where I have like different videos and I have one big long video going over all the videos at one time and whatnot. But whatever. It's almost like a, well, basically as a reaction. Whatever. I will call it here. Have a good day.